The films of Abbas Kiarostami are extraordinary. Words cannot describe my feelings about them, and I simply advise you to see his films. When Satyajit Ray passed on, I was very depressed. But after seeing Kiarostami's films, I thank God for giving us just the right person to take his place. Abbas Kiarostami is at once the most internationally recognized filmmaker in the world from Iran, but also, I think, the most local, the most Iranian. And I think this last part people don't emphasize enough. And I think one of the reasons for his success is the way he taps into the Iranian culture, Iranian society, Iranian poetry, Iranian scenery, landscapes, and all of that stuff. And the fact that he stayed in Iran when many Iranian directors left the country after the revolution, when they found it hard to make films. He didn't go abroad. He stayed in Iran and he made his films. And gradually, as his reputation arose, he was able to make films abroad while he stayed in Iran. Before all of that happened, Kiarostami worked for this advertising company, Tabli Film, and he made probably around 150 to 200 advertising films for this company. And these advertising films were for space heaters, for water heaters, for various products of that sort. He said that the advertisers said to me that these are very good films, but they are bad films because they didn't sell the products. I think he learned from advertising kind of brevity and concision, how to convey an idea very quickly, very precisely in a short order. And I think his films have those elements in them. Another thing that I think is interesting in terms of the early career was his work at the Tehran traffic office. During the day, he would take classes, and at nights, he would work at the Tehran traffic office, supervising road repairs. And I think that may have had something to do with his concern for the road and the automobile as a vehicle and as a mise en scène, as a little studio.
امتحان داریم. خیلی خب سوارشین برسونم. خیلی ممنون مدرسه همونجا. زیر همون چادرها.
The Iranian New Wave evolved in the early 1970s. Essentially, Iranian New Wave was what you might call a parallel cinema that developed alongside a popular cinema that had existed for several decades. And that popular cinema, as the name implies, it made films for the average population, for average audiences. And the films were basically, by and large, formula films. And then in the 1970s, lo and behold, with one film called The Cow, directed by Daryush Mehjuri, that film went off like a bomb, established the credence, the genres, the ideology, the aesthetics of what became known as the New Wave. That sort of opened the gateway for other filmmakers. And then Kanun was another one of those contributors to the New Wave. And that's where Kiarostami began to work. Kanun, which means the Center for the Intellectual Development of Children and Young Adults. That was the mission of the center. As Kiarostami said one time, I make films about children, but not for them. He couldn't have made the kinds of personal films, I think, anywhere else. Nobody would have funded it. Break Time and The Bread and Alley are his early films made for the Kanun, and they are focusing on young boys as the protagonist of the film. One of them is about recess. There's a boy during recess walking out of the school with his football. And as he walks towards home, he kicks the ball here and there and goofs off with various neighbors and eventually ends up at the railroad and walks home. Bread and Alley, again, is about a little boy who's gone to the bakery and bought a loaf of bread. As he's walking home, he sees a little dog in the alley, and he's afraid of it. At first, he tries to shoot the dog off, and that doesn't work because the dog keeps on his tail. And eventually, he sort of throws a piece of bread at him, and the dog suddenly becomes a loyal puppy for him. So again, this is part of the didactic structure in Kiarostami's films, is cooperation over antagonism, over difference, and so forth. In film after film after film, in the early days, he sort of pushes this idea, and here is between human and animals. Where is the Friend's House is really a seminal film because it's a long-form film that involves children, and it becomes sort of the first in a trilogy, as film critics have begun to call it. This focuses again on two school kids. One day, these two friends walk out of class, and one, by accident, takes not only his own copybook, but his friend's copybook home. When he gets home, he realizes, what is he going to do if he doesn't have the copybook? What's my responsibility? Again, the idea that children are autonomous, thinking individuals, moral characters. And so he begins to try and find him.
Salam. Alaykum salam. شما مردان نظر میشناسی؟ نه خیر آوازه نه خیر. هم کلاسی می کلاس زبان. نمیدونم آوازه. اینجا محل پشت است. پشت خونه پشت.
This shows another main motif in Kiarostami's film, a search motif. Before he does that, however, he does the homework for the boy. And so he delivers the book to the rightful owner before the class and saves his friend the trouble and shows that he has moral courage. He was responsible for taking away the book, so he has to correct the situation.
ماجرای عجیب غریب و پیچیده‌ایه. حالا خدمت عالی عرض شدم که بنده خدایی به نام محسن مخملباف رفته. خودشو به نام محسن مخملباف جهاز مخملباف میشناسی شما؟
Close Up is a film that, in a way, points to Iranian cinephilia. And especially after the revolution, when directors become sort of the stars of cinematic firmament instead of actors. It's the story of this lowly print shop worker who is enamored of Mohsen Makhmalbaf, the filmmaker who arose after the revolution, to the point that he wants to be him. Kiarostami reads this story in a newspaper, that this bogus filmmaker was arrested and taken to court. And here's where he brings in the Iranian psychological orientation between the insider and outsider, between private and the public, and all of those things. He says to him, I'm going to have two cameras in the court. This camera here is for the court. It's going to be a long shot. It shows everything that's going on. But this other camera is the close-up camera. It's for us. If anytime you want to say something to me, you talk into this camera. So the insider camera, the outsider public camera. And at the end, he brings the actual director, Makhmalbaf, to meet with the phony director. And it's a very touching scene where the phony guy almost falls to the ground to kiss the hand of the actual director, who, of course, doesn't allow him to do it. It's a part of Iranian ritual of politeness. He withdraws his hand and instead hugs him, which is more equal in equal terms. The point of the film, anyway, is the star power of director and of cinema, how a lowly printer wanted to become one, and he was willing to lie and cheat and do all kinds of things for something that was really dear to him. Again, like all Kiarostami's films, a moral issue is at the center of the film. Was he right to do that or not?
تصمیم گرفتم یه جوری خودم خلاص کنم از زندگی.
In Taste of Cherry, you have part of the sly aesthetics of Kiarostami. You have the driver who is in search of someone, an accomplice, to bury him after he commits suicide. And so there are shots, reverse shots throughout the film between these two characters as he picks up new potential recruits. But there's never a two-shot that shows the two of them in the same space. And he told me it's because anytime that the camera is on the driver, Kiarostami is sitting in this seat and interviewing the person, telling him what to say, what not to say. So you never see these two characters together in the same space in the film. This is the way he sort of undermines the realism of the film through these kinds of invisible and sometimes visible techniques. So he has a lot of artful what I'm calling sly civility elements in his style of filmmaking. And that's, I think, part of his personality as well. If you met him and you talk to him, he has that ironic sense of humor all the time. Kiarostami's film, I think, pays attention to the sound and sometimes focuses on the sound, like in the wind will carry us, where we are in the car and the camera crew is inside the car. We don't see them, but we hear them. You know, that's a good experiment in allowing us to use the other senses in the films instead of the visual sense that has come to dominate as the defining art of film. The film 10, I think, is about the presence, the forceful presence of women in Iranian society after the revolution, which was not really covered as much early on because of the restrictions about the veiling and the look and the gaze and all of that stuff. Here we have a filmmaker who, again, after the revolution, went back to having no women in his films until 10. So the 10 is significant because it's the first post-revolution film with a female actor who is almost always on camera in close-up situation. She's beautiful, she's talkative, she's forceful, she drives the car, she argues with her son, she talks to the characters in the back. Her veiling is not exactly proper, it's kind of loose. So it shows women in a more, I think, controversial, more open way, and the symbolic of the rise of Iranian women after revolution. Despite or perhaps because of the restrictions in the public space, women tried to better themselves, to rise to the occasion, and to prove themselves through education, professionalism, and all of that stuff. And I think that film 10 is sort of emblematic of that ground swelling of female power. Most people associate truth with what's obvious. You know, you put the camera on and you shoot it, and you have truth 24 frames a second. But that really gives you only the surface truth. There are things that people do, there are things that people think about, there are things that people and nations have done in the past that are hidden, and you have to really sort of go beneath that and sometimes recreate it. Like the imposter in Close-Up, you have to fictionalize, recreate, lie about something to bring out the truth in people. I mean, that little boy in the film Traveler who shoots photographs of people without a film in the camera, he's lying to people, but he's doing it for some interior meaning and desire. And if we were to only shoot him and what he shot and not the fact that he didn't have film in the camera, there would be no story there. It would be, you know, surface truth. So you have to sort of go beneath the surfaces to see the lies, or to lie in order to bring up this truth. Kiarostami has influenced both Iranian filmmakers naturally, but also I think he has influenced filmmakers around the world, the art house filmmakers in Europe, in the US, and all the awards that he has won also. These awards are not given to a nation or to a country or whatever. They're given to a filmmaker, and he's received so many different awards at so many different places that shows that he's really admired. He was a filmmaker that I think universal in several ways. One is that the topics, the issues that he dealt with were universal, regardless of language and so forth. You could understand what he was making the film about. The other was that you couldn't pigeonhole him into a particular genre of film or type of film. He was a man of all trade, and he was a craftsman and a poet. And the use of the various arts, whether it was cinematography, photography, poetry, music, all of these he brought in one way or another in various films. I think he lived cinema. If we were to reformulate Descartes' famous dictum, I think, therefore I am, for Kiarostami, it would be something like, I make films, therefore I am.